Chapter 3, August 17, 2016. Georgetown Coffee Shop, Washington, D.C. Prisha Vida Barry sat at a table in her new local coffee shop. It was only a 10-minute walk from her Tony townhouse in Georgetown, a historically upscale enclave of the movers and shakers in Washington, D.C. There had been an incident at her old coffee shop which involved Prisha screaming at the manager trainee and hurling a full cup of coffee against the wall just over the young woman's head. This outburst had earned Prisha a lifetime ban. She would have called corporate and had the trainee fired, but this establishment was a start-up, so she'd calmly walked a few blocks over and found a new place to plant her flag. From her very first visit, Prisha knew which table was hers. It was a four-top against the wall in the back. It was the only table that had an unobstructed view of both the door and the large window overlooking the street. The fact that this table was one of only two four-top tables in the busy shop mattered not to her. Prisha was serious about her coffee. She typically had a cup in hand throughout her long work days, which is to say, most days. Like any addict, she had acclimated to the caffeine and sometimes took her last cup as late as 10 p.m, to no effect. But she always took her first cup early, and in a coffee shop, never at home. It was one of the few things for which she was punctual, for punctuality led to routine, and routine made one predictable a bad thing in her line of work. Prisha had easily charmed Adam, the morning manager at her new shop. Adam was a young man, and Prisha had never had any problems gaining the affection of young men, or men of any age for that matter. Prisha was long and slender, with thick raven hair that fell below her shoulders and looked equally good worn up or down. Her dark eyes were large and expressive in contrast to her sharp features. Almond skin gave her an exotic look that hit men like catnip. After her successful exploitation of Adam, it was simply a matter of shuffling the pack order of her fellow morning coffee patrons. Prisha knew that they, like her, had their own morning coffee rituals. So she convinced Adam to let her into the shop 15 minutes before opening so that she was firmly ensconced at her new table when the early morning regulars shuffled in. The dirty looks and grumbling from the table's former occupants were of no consequence to Prisha. Quite the opposite, in fact. She revelled in their discomfort and struggled to hide her smirk. It took only a week of this before the regulars had begrudgingly accepted their new queen. And so it was on this warm Wednesday morning in August that Prisha was at her table sipping her second cup, which Adam had delivered to her upon her signal for a refill. As usual, she was face down in her laptop, an oversized thumb drive protruding from the USB port, furiously tapping away at the keyboard, earbuds in both ears. The universal sign for "Leave me the fuck alone." Most people were happy to oblige. But not all people. Prisha felt the woman's eyes on her first, didn't even have to look up, for she had the keen peripheral vision of an apex predator. Without any other discernible movement, she raised her eyes just enough to see three women standing nearby, large coffees in hand. They huddled together, speaking amongst themselves, with faces like curdled milk. They were not morning regulars, and clearly didn't know the drill. What these three women didn't know was that Prisha's earbuds were all for show. They were always turned off in the shop, although she smiled and bobbed her head occasionally to indicate she was enjoying an imaginary song or video. Another thing these women didn't know was that Prisha's sense of hearing was as keen as her sight, even with the earbuds jammed into her ears. The ruse caused people to speak in normal conversational tones around her and say things they might not say if they knew she was listening. Prisha heard the women snark. How rude she was for taking up a whole table all by herself, and what a bitch she was for not giving the table up to them. One of them suggested they should complain to the manager. The other two eagerly agreed, and all three turned and headed for the counter to complain to Adam. Prisha's face creased in a mirthless smile. The three women stood at the counter, backs to Prisha, gesticulating at Adam. Prisha caught his eye and winked. He smiled back. A fait accompli. Prisha went back to her laptop, and in her peripheral vision she saw the three women stomp out of the shop. She took a long pull of her coffee and signalled Adam for one more. She watched the little group bustle past the big window and stared at them until one of the women looked her way. It was another power she had. Her stare never went unanswered. Prisha nodded at the woman, held up her coffee in salute. The woman's face flushed, and she turned and tugged at the arm of her friend closest to her. The other two turned round and got the same coffee cup salute. Prisha smiled widely now, her full red lips pulled back to bare her prominent white teeth. She knew this was going to be a good day. Prisha closed out the file she was reviewing and ejected the thumb drive. She placed it in a small plastic pouch, zipped it, then zipped the pouch into a second bag before putting it into the front pants pocket of her charcoal grey Chanel pantsuit. Her last cup of coffee was half full. She raised it to her lips and almost choked as the shrill scream of a small child at the next table pierced her ears. The child was under 2 years of age, red in the face and screaming at the top of his little lungs. Prisha was childless by choice. She hated kids of all ages, screaming obnoxious toddlers most of all. Hated all the fawning over children and the aggrandizement of the mothers, like they were all heroes for being born with eggs capable of fertilization. This mother appeared to be satisfied to let her little demon cry it out. She made no attempt to stop the screaming or even acknowledge it, as she calmly pecked at her iPhone. Prisha shuddered as she thought of what her father, a devout Wahhabi Muslim, would make of this. The West was still such a foreign land to her in many ways. Prisha looked around the coffee shop at the other customers. The shop was rectangular, with counter and bar area on one side and the tables on the other. The decor was a modern industrial style. The stained concrete floors and tin ceiling magnified the child's screams. Most customers were clearly annoyed, but braced their heads into tucked shoulders and avoided eye contact. A few women gave the mother sympathetic looks and tried to make light of the situation. The kid maintained his decibel level, undeterred.